Hello and welcome to a PBS short on the failures of capitalism.
Hello, and welcome to the PBS short on the failures of capitalism. Under capitalism, private property becomes an essential part of the system. Private property, by definition, is the legal ownership of various entities by non-government individuals and/or organizations. Under capitalism, private property operates as wealth that is gained through purchase. An individual's private property and money combined constitutes their capital. Private property is also defined through commodification, a system by which goods, services, and things that normally would not be considered as such are rendered purchasable. During the Depression era, labor power was defined as private property. Under the capitalist system, those who have not accumulated enough capital to sustain themselves over a lifetime are forced to sell their creativity, physical ability, and intellectual capacity to a member of the bourgeois, a class of people owning most of society's wealth and means of production. The Dust Bowl migration was the epitome of migration due to the failures of capitalism. During the Dust Bowl years, the weather destroyed nearly all the crops farmers tried to grow on the Great Plains. What few crops did survive at such low prices that farmers could not earn a living. Farmers who rented the land and farmhouse couldn't pay rent, and farmers who owned their land couldn't make payments. Parents packed up their children and belongings and moved west. The capitalists at this time, aka the banks, took advantage of the farmers' capital outweighing theirs. As the crops died, the farmers' capital decreased dramatically, and while the bank's capital increased because of them taking advantage of new lands and high loans, capitalism's beneficiaries and victims share one goal: profit. The bourgeois accumulates capital by exploiting the proletariat, the class of people selling their labor power. Although the proletariat are rewarded with a wage when products are sold, this wage is not the full value of their power. The bourgeois keeps a portion of profit for themselves to gain surplus capital, augmenting the poverty of workers who receive few economic benefits from the sale. Now, let's turn our attention to some well-known figures and hear what they have to say about the failures of capitalism.
Did capitalism cause the Great Depression? Capitalism's negative effects mainly deal with the distribution of money. Capitalistic economies are prone to boom and bust economic cycles. During the boom, the economy grows, jobs are plentiful, and the market brings high returns to investors. In the subsequent bust cycle, the economy shrinks, people lose their jobs, and investors lose money. Boom and bust cycles last for varying lengths of time, and they also vary in severity. The Great Depression is known as one of the harsher results of the economic cycles, where corporations gain power, allowing them to control the falling economy and exploit the consumers. Firms with monopoly power can pay low wages as people are fighting for any job that they can get their hands on, leading to the large inequality between those in power and those struggling to survive.
A major flaw in our current economic system of capitalism is its reinforcement of the economic disparity between the wealthy and the poor. A prime example of this is how corporations and banks react to the Dust Bowl as well as the Great Depression. But to understand this, one must look to the years prior of these cataclysmic events. Prior to the Dust Bowl, in the 1920s, wages were stagnant and the products of corporations were often overpriced. Oftentimes, this made it impossible for people to buy necessities. So, corporate greed, allowed by capitalism, made it impossible for people to afford basic goods, thus forcing them to buy things with credit. Now, this may seem fine, but as the drought continued and people still were not able to earn their salaries from their crops, they were unable to pay off their credit, and as a result, they were forced to migrate to the West for jobs. The lack of government involvement, which is encouraged by capitalism, allowed for corporations to exploit these people by seizing their land and then paying them next to nothing for the few jobs that were available. There is the failure of ideas such as efficient market hypotheses, which deluded its believers about the absence of market failures such as asset bubbles. The rational expectations paradigm that clashes with the insights of behavioral economics and finances, and the self-regulation of markets and institutions that clashes with the classical agency problems in corporate governance. that are themselves exasperated in financial companies by the greater degree of asymmetric information.
In the capitalist system, prices are determined by the unregulated competition between privately owned businesses and free markets. In theory, if markets remain unregulated, supply and demand for products will reach equilibrium. People will pursue their own interests, make businesses out of them, and if the idea is beneficial to society, then they will profit. The harder they work to find the perfect supply for society's demand, the more profit they will accumulate. Any social inequality that is generated by such a system can therefore be chalked up to natural differences. But differently, if some people are poor, it is because they have been deemed to be worthless, while those who make billions must work more and be worth more. Pure capitalism, a system in which the state has no influence over the market, does not exist anywhere in the world, but forms of capitalism certainly influence the global economic and political systems. Globalization is essentially capitalism on a global scale, which has been enabled by the increased technological innovations and relationships between nations enabled by imperialist past. With the rise of imperialism, the Industrial Revolution, wealthy, industrialized nations began to compete with each other to gain control over natural resources and labor power across the globe. In doing so, they created a centripetal economy in which profit flowed into the hands of wealthy nations, especially in the West. Capitalists poised the capitalism can create wealth for all, that it guarantees personal freedom, that those who can work hard enough can accumulate wealth, and that democracy can only exist under a capitalist economy. Capitalism's genius is that it has almost completely succeeded in naturalizing itself, telling its victims that a society without it is not a society at all. Additionally, the capitalist system is insidious. It infiltrates almost every aspect of society.
John Steinbeck is an American classic. In his novels, he chooses to write about the struggles of 20th century America, not only economically, but psychologically as well. As Californians, we have an innate connection to his writings, especially Grapes of Wrath, because at some point in our own history, we were all migrating to this western state. Steinbeck's subtle and not so subtle representations of his ideologies are apparent throughout his entire novel. He has this idea of an egalitarian and cooperative society that he almost represents as a utopia in the government camp. Weed Patch is a community where everybody's equal. Everybody's given the same opportunities. Everybody does the same jobs. The houses are uniform. There is no sense of a social hierarchy. And this is understandably where the Jodes are the happiest. This sense of inherent equality is exterminated by capitalism. Those who can afford the luxuries of proper housing and an adequate food supply receive it and can exploit the disparity of those who can, only to further increase their own fortune. Steinbeck presents this message brutally in The Grapes of Wrath with intense images of death, starvation, and poverty among the working class.
Some cultural critics of capitalism believe that the system is destroying the traditional culture and ways of living. To elaborate, the main ways the market does this is through innovation. As new technologies, industries, and goods and services emerge, they make older ones obsolete. Old industries are shut down and new ones emerge. Some traditional and artisanal trades are lost forever, and this can be a cultural impoverishment.